Hi, I'm Rowan Patical and you're watching the second of a series of demonstration videos for Symlabs Virtual Directory Server and LDAP Proxy. Now that you're familiar with each of the parts of the configuration, let's set the application up to act as a simple pass-through proxy. To start with, we will need to add a directory to the server group in the output part of the configuration. In this case, we've already created a configuration, but you can see here that you will need to enter the details of a back-end server such as its IP address and the port that it is listening on. Server groups can contain multiple servers, but all of the servers in the group will need to contain the same data. If there are SSL requirements, you will need to configure these as well. As you can see, there are some other tabs here to set up load balancing, failover and connection pooling. Load balancing and failover will only come into play when you have more than one server listed in your server group. This means that if you have any replica LDAP servers in your environment, you can instantly create a high performance or high availability solution by simply selecting the algorithm that you would like to use, and in fact, many customers choose to use LDAP Proxy specifically to take advantage of this functionality. Under the Connection Pooling tab, you can see that we have configured this server group to use a connection pool using fixed credentials. Connection pools hold open a number of connections to the back-end servers so that the connections do not need to be initiated for each incoming request. This also helps to improve performance and reduce any latency experienced by client applications. Now that we have a server group configured, we will need to configure a listener at the input part of the configuration. Here we can simply add a listener and then fill in the required parameters. In this case, we have set our listener to use the port 3890 as the virtual directory server instance will be running on the same system as an LDAP server, which is already listening on port 389. We've also defined a default server group where all incoming traffic will be routed, unless we add any processing functionality that determines otherwise. And that is all that is required for the most basic configuration. All that remains is for us to test that it works. We can start it up from within DSGUI by clicking on the Run button. Now, using the built-in browser, you can use any LDAP client you're comfortable with. We can connect to the listener on the local host at port 3890 and see that the client is able to access the back-end server. Once the browser has connected, you will be able to see the branches and entries from the back-end system. If we look at the standard output for the configuration instance, you can see that we have set this configuration up to return some debugging information about the server groups. This helps to illustrate how the system is routing the requests to the connection pool within the server group. You can also see how DS Proxy intelligently determines whether a request is a bind request or not, and avoids using the connection pool for authentication traffic to ensure that the bind request is properly authenticated. Of course, by adding other replica servers into the server group and instantly taking advantage of the load balancing and failover options that are available, this basic configuration may be more useful. But this is a fairly trivial operation that we may explore later. For now, it may be more useful to take a look at the processing part of the configuration. Here we can add a processing stage. We will use an automatic stage so that we are able to use a built-in plugin, and we will call the processing stage log to make its purpose clearer. Now we can click on Add Plugin, and we can select one of the logging plugins to log all access attempts to our directory. Once this plugin is attached, you can access its configuration panel, and you can see that there are some very simple options that will allow you to enable a logging facility to create an audit log of all interactions with the back-end server group. All we need to do is attach this plugin to the listener and save the configuration, and then start the instance again. Now you can see that in the logging panel an additional log file is viewable. This file is stored on the file system where DS Proxy is running and will store a log of all access attempts. Let's open the LDAP browser again and see the log in action. And here you can see each interaction as it takes place. This is one of the 4 different logging plugins that are included with the product, and each one provides different levels of information and can be used for different purposes. With this plugin, we have added some more functionality to the pass-through proxy configuration. Of course, in this demonstration we have only introduced you to some of the more basic usage of the product. In the following video tutorials we will start to tackle some of the more problematic use case scenarios that we mentioned in the introductory video, but by now hopefully you can see where the LDAP Proxy or Virtual Directory Server software fits into your architecture and how easy it is to configure and manage. Join us in the next demonstration video to discover how you can use virtual trees to create a unified presentation and authentication layer for multiple directories.